Welcome to PBCJ's coverage of the sitting of the Senate. I'm Simone Absalom, and I'll provide a brief outline of what's expected to take place during the sitting. But before you begin, did you know that a motion means a proposal by a senator that the Senate thereof or a committee do something, order something to be done, or express an opinion concerning some matter? On the agenda today, the State of the Nation debate. Senators Sophia Fraser-Binns and Sapphire Longmore will be making their contributions to the debates. The State of the Nation debate gives senators the opportunity to address issues of national importance. It also gives cabinet members in the Senate an opportunity to address their portfolio responsibilities while highlighting government policies and programs. That's what's on the agenda. It should be noted that elements of the day's agenda can be changed or moved. But before we go, here are a few things you should bear in mind if you plan to attend a session at Gordon House. No visitor shall create any act of disorder within the precincts of the House. No visitor shall be admitted to the House without obtaining an admission card. Visitors who remain within the precincts of the House during a suspension of the session are asked to keep silent. No photography, videography, or sketching of the proceedings is allowed unless so authorized by the presiding officer, and there should be no smoking inside the parliamentary building. Now over to the proceedings.
We recognize that your contribution in this particular field is one that has now received international recognition. And we know, all of us who know you, accept that the recommendation to appoint you to this position is one that will bear fruits for all who come within your circle. So please accept my personal recognition and congratulations. And we ask that the Senate make a note of your preferment.
Thank you, Mr. President. If I might be allowed to also extend congratulations from this side of the chamber. The decision of CARICOM to appoint a rapporteur had its birth in a declaration by heads as far back as 2013. They actually required a special meeting to be had focused on persons with disabilities, which took place later in that year, and it has taken 5 years within which to manifest. And we are so very proud and so honored that it is our very own Jamaican nominee, Senator Dr. Floyd Morris, who now holds this honored position. Mr. President, there was apparently quite a well-qualified group of nominees who were reviewed by the advisory committee, and it was found that Senator Morris was indeed that person who showed head and shoulders above, and who it was unanimously thought should become the rapporteur. Mr. President, this isn't surprising to us, noting his recent receipt or the conferral of the doctoral degree, his publications, his role in negotiation, in supporting the negotiation of the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, which, as you know, resulted in Jamaica being the very first country to sign on to that convention. These are all things of which Senator Morris can personally be proud, of which he can be personally proud, and of which Jamaica can also be personally proud. So we know that the role itself, the support that will be given by the CARICOM Secretariat and others, that there will be much work ahead and much work to be done to ensure that the rights of vulnerable persons, and in particular persons living with disabilities across the Caribbean, are supported and protected. So we want to not only say how proud we are of you, but that we support you in the work. We encourage you to continue to do good in your chosen field of passion and excellence. And again, Mr. President, ask that the Senate record our most sincere congratulations to Senator Morris on this appointment. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Scott Markey.
Mr. President, the Minister so eloquently laid out the appreciation for Senator Floyd Morris, Senator Dr. Floyd Morris, that there's little that remains for me to say. His life has been a source of inspiration to many. And when one thinks about the fact that he left St. Mary's High without a single subject because of his disability, because he lost his sight, and when one traces that journey to having acquired his PhD, to having published his first book with others to come, you realize that he sends a signal that you can do anything as long as you know you can do it. I think he has many places in history. He was the 11th President of the Senate, the first President of the Senate who was not cited. And he keeps on accomplishing things, but I think it is motivated by his strong desire to serve and his strong desire to assist others who have experienced a plight in some way or the other. So many other persons don't see it as being their duty, their responsibility, their commitment, or their motivation. What was inspirational to me, Minister, was the fact that the recommendation did not come from Jamaica. It actually came from a Barbadian. And that tells you that people are really observing the work which is being done here and the work which Floyd has done. So my first question to him was, well, does that mean you have to leave the Senate? And I was reassured that special arrangements would have been made to accommodate him. I do know it will require a lot of travel, and I do know that it will require a lot of application. But they could not have chosen a better person. And although it did take from 2013 to now, we are on this side, as are you, and as all of Jamaica, and indeed the region. We welcome this recognition of the tremendous work and the contribution which he has made. May it please you.
Senator Morris, you're not going to get away without saying a few words.
Mr. President, thank you, Leader of Government Business. Thank you, Leader of Opposition Business in the Senate, for your kind words and the sentiments expressed. And I want to start out, Mr. President, by thanking all my colleagues and the staff at the Parliament for the support that they have given me over the years in terms of honing my skills and the advocacy that I've presented for persons with disabilities, because it is through the work that I have done here and elsewhere that individuals have seen and recognized that persons with disabilities have a major stake and a major role to play in the advancement of their societies. And the fact is, Mr. President, persons with disabilities never created the situation themselves to be recognized as the poorest, as individuals who are unemployed, uneducated. It is society that has created these situations that have impacted on their lives. And being an individual who experience firsthand the challenges within the society and have managed to fight my way through and attain some level of success, I believe that it is incumbent upon me to clear the way and intensify the fight for those who are less fortunate than I am. And that is why, Mr. President, in this Parliament, I've said to individuals, you know, my training has been in communication. My training has been in terms of political economy. But I have spent the bulk of my time speaking about issues relating to persons with disabilities, because the truth is, Mr. President, you have 21 members of the Senate and 20 individuals get up and speak about a lot of individuals and things in the broader society. I decided that I am going to zero in on this population that oftentimes we tend to neglect. Based on estimates, you're talking about 400,000 Jamaicans. In the Caribbean, when you include Haiti as a member of CARICOM, you're talking about 1 million individuals. That is the constituency that I seek to represent and to speak about. And the role will require me going broader afield to act as that interface between the community of persons with disabilities, the different governments within the region, and CARICOM as a major stakeholder. And I say that one of the good things about the role is that I will determine when and where I travel. And so I don't envisage a major problem in terms of my role in the Senate and my duties at the University of the West Indies. As a matter of fact, in speaking to the Vice Chancellor and accepting the role, he has pledged the university's fulsome support for me in executing my role. And so I look forward to representing and advocating for all persons with disabilities in Jamaica, across the Caribbean, and whatsoever I can do. Minister of Education, you know, one of my pet peeves have been education for persons with disabilities, and anything that I can do. And when I say anything I can do to assist in the process, I am just a telephone call away. May it please you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Senator Morris. Senator Scott Morley, do I record that as Senator Morris's contribution to the State of the Nation? Statement by ministers. Announcements. Bills brought from the Honourable House of Representatives. Petitions. Papers. Reports from committees. Notices of motions given orally. Questions and answers to questions. Every time I reach this item, I miss Senator Montague. I wonder what is happening to the abattoir in Port Maria. I don't know. Motions that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice. Motions relating to the sitting of the Senate. Motions for leave to introduce bills. The presentation of bills without the leave of the Senate first obtained. Public business. Minister.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, today I have the pleasure to advise that we will be continuing with the State of the Nation debate. And the debate having been opened by Senator Morrison last week, on behalf of the government, I understand Senator Fraser Binns will now open on behalf of the opposition. We will follow thereafter with the contribution to the debate by Senator Longmore. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Minister.
Mr. President. And Minister, for correction, it is Senator Fraser Binns and company, because I do have company in my presentation today.
Senator Fraser Binns, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I stand to make my contribution to this, the State of Our Nation debate. And I wish to thank the Lord, our Creator, for his many blessings on me and my family. Indeed, great has been his faithfulness. I also thank our leader, Dr. Peter David Phillips, for the confidence that he continues to repose in me. I promise to continue to represent the interest of our people with conscience and vigor as we seek to create a Jamaica that works for all. Mr. President, and I mean the other president, we thank you for your humor that you have brought to this Senate. Your humor, sir, is unparalleled. There are many times that you have eased the tension with your humor, and for that we are grateful. My colleagues, and I dare say my friends on the other side, I know specifically Minister Reid and I know that amidst the very robust debates, we're all Jamaicans who want to see Jamaica works for all. To my family on this side, led by Good morning, Mr. President. To my family on this side, led by Mother Hen Senator Donna Scott Motley. You have led us with such insight, and we're so grateful for the support and the wisdom that you have shown. And to the men in my life, Jeffrey and Nathan Charles. To the men in my life, Jeffrey and Nathan Charles. Many people do not know the sacrifice one makes when he or she joins politics, especially as a mother and as a wife. The things our families become exposed to because of our choice to serve in public life. You, my dear, know. Whether it is the absence from family time or taking home the stress to offload on you, you have never become tired of filling the gap or hearing me babble. You both are the loves of my life and the life that I love. Mr. President, there is little doubt that as a country, as a small island developing state, our preoccupation must be with sustainable development. As a consequence, the use of our land and natural resources must become paramount in our thoughts and deliberations. We do not have the luxury of simply undertaking development without considering the effect on our environment, our people, and our future. Therefore, my presentation today, under the theme, Sustainable Development for a Development that is Sustainable, will focus on how, as a country, we can seek to redirect our energies and attention to ensure that all our undertakings are in keeping with the goals of sustainable development. And I shall wish to start by looking at the issue of bauxite. There is no doubt in anyone's mind that financially the country has benefited from this sector. Indeed, in the 70s and the 80s, it was a source of much income for the country and arguably kept us afloat, partly due to the insight of former Prime Minister Michael Manley, who had the vision of a bauxite levy. But over the years, so much has changed. Bauxite is no longer king. Markets have been on the decline until very recently. Plants have been closed, some reopened, some still unopened. We salute the work of former Minister Paul Well and former Prime Minister Portia Simpson-Miller, who had the determination to negotiate with GISCO for the reopening of Alpart, which continues to play an important role in that community. But we also question the wisdom of this administration in granting a waiver of the bauxite levy at a time when we could be earning. But, Mr. President, the debate about sustainable development and bauxite has to go beyond a discussion on the levy. I believe that as a country, the time has come for us to have a serious discussion on the cost-benefit of bauxite. The time has come for us to have a study on the cost-benefit of bauxite and whether in 2018 it still should have pride of place. We are compelled as a nation to consider the growing environmental impact, the impact on family life, the impact on land ownership, and plain and simple, whether it impacts positively on the standard of living of ordinary Jamaicans in these communities. We must consider the effect on our farmers in these parishes. The reality, Mr. President, is that many of our small farmers are giving up their lands, whether because they feel compelled or because of other reasons. These farmers are the ones who normally grow their crops and sell them at the market, but their lands have now become mined out. Mr. President, having gone into some of these bauxite mining communities with Senator Skeffrey, and having spoken to residents, a number of troubling issues have come to mind. What we see happening is an increase in persons who were usually independent, self-sufficient, becoming dependent as their livelihood by way of farming is no longer present. There is also a direct impact on the quality of life of these persons. Mr. President, then there is the long-standing issue of land titling for bauxite lands. Amidst the efforts of successive governments, we have failed to deliver successfully in this regard. Still, too many families, after many, many decades, cannot get a title for their land. Thousands of persons continue to be affected by bauxite lands as they struggle to obtain title for the property. And then, Mr. President, there is a practice where if one does not have a registered title for his property, if he decides to sell it to the bauxite company, he only gets a portion of the sale price until the registered title is obtained. This is an unfair practice, and although one argues that it takes place in the negotiation process, the fact is that these community persons have an unequal bargaining power, and oftentimes they feel compelled to sell. Therefore, we must ensure that the playing field is level. There is, in fact, a role for the government to assist these persons to ensure that they are not affected negatively by this decision. The time has come for us as a country to take a real and serious look on whether these practices are beneficial to our people. Mr. President, the snail pace at which we have been treating with the titling for bauxite land is not sustainable. The current practices in such a sector is bequeathing a legacy of generational poverty, and we have a duty as a government to put an end to it. But apart from titling, Mr. President, I need not lament the number of environmental impact that bauxite mining has on our country. We need not delineate the health impact that it has. It is an issue that continues to impact the lives of so many of our residents. These bauxite-rich communities have aided the modernization and development of Europe and other areas over the many, many decades. And what do we have to show? We accept that there is some foreign exchange, but is it worth it? We must ask ourselves, at what cost to the residents in these communities? At what cost to the environment? At what cost to sustainable development? We must ask ourselves, are we developing sustainably? A study of residents in mining communities done in March of this year, where again Senator Skeffrey and I were present, revealed some very disturbing facts. Persons were complaining that there has been an increase in various illnesses, ranging from runny nose to nausea to respiratory challenges, asthma, sinusitis, bronchitis, itching and burning of skin, weight loss, particularly among children, more increased visits to hospitals, farm animals dying and in some cases falling ill, destruction in farm produce, reduction in crop yield, and difficulty sleeping. Contaminated water, inability to harvest rainwater, and contaminated water source. These are not made-up consequences. These are consequences that persons like you and I may never know, but are consequences that persons living in bauxite mining communities experience daily. Some of these persons, Mr. President, have simply become frustrated and have given up. They have moved out and have sought to start over, but start over from ground zero. Mr. President, the time has come for us as a country to decide, is it worth it? And then we look at the air quality. The organs of the state that have been established to undertake the requisite air quality test, we wonder, have they been successful? Have they been true to their cause? Our study shows that these organs have not undertaken any air quality tests, but rather rely on the test of the bauxite companies, which, understandably so, have always been within the limit. Mr. President, I make an appeal that the agents of the state must use the law and the resources to protect the rights and the interests of our people. If there is a need for additional resources, then the request must be made and same must be provided. NEPA is a bastion of the preservation of the environment, and therefore all efforts must be made to ensure that it acts accordingly. Continuing on the issue of bauxite, let us look at the sub-issue of land reclamation or restoration. You see, Mr. President, the regulations to the Mining Act provide some guidance as to how reclamation should be done. And reclamation essentially takes place after mining is completed and you're supposed to restore the land to a particular standard. The regulation provides that the company has a maximum of 3 years after the completion of mining within which to restore the land. Otherwise, there's a paying of penalty of $25,000 per hectare. Mr. President, again, my team and I, of which Kefri is a part, have been to several of these communities, and we have examined different mining pits. In some of the communities that we have examined, some of these lands or pits, which have been said to be reclaimed, are at minimum 100 feet deep. Mr. President, this poses an existential threat to all Jamaicans, particularly our children. In fact, at a meeting held by the Jamaica Environmental Trust, one community leader lamented the challenges and the fear that the community had over these reclaimed pits. I therefore ask, Mr. President, I therefore call, Mr. President, for a very urgent and immediate review of the regulations and the standards for restoration of land. You see, Mr. President, when you see some of these pits, they are so deep. Some of these pits which have been said to be reclaimed or restored, they are still so deep that they cannot be used for nothing, including agricultural purposes, thereby continuing the cycle of generational poverty. One of the things that we must do as a responsible government is that we must take a more deliberate and purposeful consideration in how land is reclaimed or restored. So, for example, the National Spatial Plan that is being done now should not only just consider the environmental and climate change impact in these communities, but it should consider, given the level of poverty in mining communities, the proposed future use that would improve the quality and the lives of the residents, thereby facilitating sustainable development. I am convinced, sir, and I'm deeply convinced, that after all these issues, the only thing that a responsible government can do is to undertake a cost-benefit study of the sector. I am not saying that we should not continue with bauxite mining, but no one can deny, because no one can deny the benefit of bauxite. But we are forced to consider the health impact. Have we ever done a study to see how the persons who are have been affected over the last 40 years in these communities? We consider the environmental impact. How, for example, the mud lake may or may not impact on our underwater ground supply? Have we considered how the cutting down of trees affect our watershed, our trees and forest cover? We must consider the impact on agriculture, the output and the quality of the food that we eat. And we must consider the impact on family lives and the economy. We know that hundreds of persons are employed by the bauxite companies. But what about those who are not? What about their livelihood? How does this impact on them? These are some real questions that we must address if we are to seriously consider the future of bauxite and sustainable development. Mr. President, I now turn to an area where everybody knows I am extremely passionate about. And that, Senator Samuda, has to do with the issue of land titling and regularization. We all know that over 700,000 Jamaicans are living in informal settlements. We are also aware of the efforts of successive governments to make the titling process easier, whether it was by way of the promulgation of the Facilities for Titles Act or the amendment to the Registration of Titles Act to include adverse possession, or the passage of the Special Provisions Act, which gave birth to LAMP, and most recently, the merger of the National Land Agency and LAMP. The fact, though, is that with the exception of LAMP, we have not truly delved into the issue to truly find a solution to provide complete land ownership for our people. And after 56 years of independence, we simply have no excuse because we have failed. Therefore, Mr. President, any government that is serious about prosperity or progress must address once and for all the shame of landlessness in this country. I know that the leader of the opposition, Dr. Peter Phillips, have made it a priority that when we become government, we will once and for all root out the issue of landlessness. However, we must act now. Listen to this, Senator Reid. We must act now. And so for the remaining 12 months that you have as government, this is kind of long, you know. I'm actually being kind and I'm being very generous. But, Senator Reid, for the remaining time that you're in government, you have
Senator Gale, do you have a comment for the senator, or you're just disturbing her?
She's disturbing me, sir. But seriously though, you have a duty to act and to ensure things commence immediately. Yeah. Mr. President, two Government of Jamaica studies conducted in 2004 and 2008 revealed that 82% of the informal settlements were located in and around urban centers. Kingston and St. Andrew accounted for the greatest numbers, followed by St. Catherine. The study also showed that 75% of squatting, and I prefer to say informal settlement, was taking place on government land. 16% on private land, with the remainder unknown. 75% on government, 16% on private. We all know that government is the largest landowner, and invariably we ought not to be surprised with this finding. It does have serious implications for land use, but at the same time, sir, I do believe it presents a glorious opportunity for us to commence the process of resolving informal settlements once and for all. I say this looking at the example of our sister Caribbean country, Dominica. In Dominica, they undertook a radical land titling program where government land was distributed to those already in possession. This was done by selling lands to persons at a percentage of the market value, undertaking the requisite surveys and providing land title services to many informal settlers. It could only be possible because the government was determined that the vestiges of slavery must be stamped out and that land was not a privilege but a right for all. It also accepted that the government has a moral obligation to its people to end landlessness. That same determination and will is required in Jamaica. I therefore recommend that the government of Jamaica move quickly to study the Dominican approach and apply this to our situation with the necessary modifications. Really, what is to stop us from divesting these government lands to persons who are already in possession? We're not giving it away. But a system must be designed to ensure that those persons who are already in possession for extended period are given the opportunity to purchase. Mr. President, let us start by creating the ownership society that we so badly need and that all Jamaicans deserve. I know Senator Pernell Charles that the naysayers, not you, the naysayers will ask, what about infrastructure? What about planning? What about sewage? And I appreciate those questions. But in my previous presentations, I have always maintained that we have to separate the issue of planning from titling. But the answer, sir, is that the government must work hand in hand with the people to have these done. The government has a moral duty and obligation to do so. These factors cannot be the deterrent to persons being able to access land. We have to stop finding excuses. Let us find a way to work with our informal settlers. Let us find a way to work with our informal settlers, to give them titles. Let us find a way to create the Jamaica that works for all. Mr. President, let us find a way to level up the system. And that saying is very apt because it is Youth Month. I tell you as well, Mr. President, that many persons, and my experience at LAM teaches me, that many persons are willing to pay. They may not be able to pay the cost up front, but they are willing to pay incrementally if they know that at the end of the day, they will get the piece of paper that say that they are the registered owner. By stemming the scourge of landlessness, we are taking people out of poverty and making them progressive, or as my friends on the other side will say, making them prosperous. Whichever word is the word of the day, I simply say, let's get it on. By dealing with the issue of landlessness, we are also solving the crippling crime problem at its core. We are empowering our citizens to feel a sense of pride from owning their lands, knowing that they will not be forced off overnight. We are allowing our citizens to feel recognized as true citizens of this country, because even the term squatter connotes a sense of detachment, unbelonging, alienation. And the social bond theory confirms that residents are likely to commit crimes, that are less likely to commit crimes if they feel engaged, when they feel bonded to their societies. These bonds include familial ties, land ownership, and a positive relationship with the state. Mr. President, regularizing these informal settlements will only contribute positively to the society. The country stands to benefit. It is a win-win. It gives land to the landless, restores trust to government, and the government also stands to earn from the sale or lease of these lands. let me quickly add that the details of this scheme will have to be worked out, because not every community will be able to have a titling program. There will be instances, given environmental and other impact, that there may have to be resettlement. But these are issues that we can deal with along the way. Let us not kick the bucket any further down the road, but let us start, and the time, Mr. President, is now. And as we speak of informal settlement, we are forced to look at the progress of the regularization program. And part of the reason why it has been so slow is that the squatter management unit within the Ministry of Housing, which has the responsibility to lead the resettlement program for the entire Jamaica, has a glorious staff complement of 2 persons.
What? Yes, sure.
2 persons. It's laughable if it wasn't so sad.
Sure.
These 2 persons, Mr. President, these 2 persons, Mr. President, are responsible for the program for the entire Jamaica. It is wholly inadequate, and it shows the seriousness, or the lack thereof, with which we treat land titling and squatter or informal settlement. In light of this, Mr. President, I go further and say that the squatter management unit, which is now in the Ministry of Housing, will be better placed in the Ministry of Land. Perhaps we may also consider the establishment of a national land resettlement agency similar to what obtains in Trinidad and Tobago. We have to treat the matter with seriousness if we're serious about land ownership and transforming Jamaica. I now wish to turn to the issue of land acquisition by government and private entities. The current methodologies that are being used in acquiring lands, particularly from small farmers or from informal settlers, are bequeathing a legacy of generational poverty. The truth, Mr. President, is that in many instances, what we find is that these persons, although they do not have a registered title, have acquired legal rights to the property, having occupied same in excess of the period stipulated by law. But what we find happening, as is evident in the Junction Road situation, as is evident in what we see in the hills of East Rural by the coffee farmers, is that there's no negotiation. What we see is that persons are essentially being forced off lands. I therefore ask that we take a heartful approach to this situation, that we engage the residents more. Perhaps, Mr. President, it may be useful to establish an adjudication committee similar to what Perhaps it may be useful, Senator Hill, to establish an adjudication committee similar to those established on the land to assist in the deliberation and the determination of land rights. The truth is that we have to begin to treat our people on both sides with a higher level of decency. The issue of land is at the heart of fighting poverty. As a government, and when I say government, I'm speaking the government and the opposition, we have a duty to facilitate the best design. We have a duty to facilitate and design the best system which can assist the poor to obtain ownership and realize their economic dream, and by extension, Jamaica's dream.
Mr. President. President, the Speaker's time having expired, might it be extended to allow her to complete her presentation?
Absolutely. Thank you very much. The question is that the Speaker be permitted time to complete her presentation. Those in favor? Aye. Senator Binns.
Thank you, Mr. President. I didn't realize the time. You know, time flies when you're having fun. And I think my colleagues are all having fun. But I'm cognizant that my colleague speaks next, so I'll try and go a little faster. Mr. President, I turn to the issue of the merger of LAMP and NLA. And everybody knows my position on that. I do believe it is a backward step. Notwithstanding the consultant report, the fact is that LAMP does not need a merger with the National Land Agency for it to achieve its objective. LAMP simply wants additional resources and the requisite amendments to the Act to give it effect. Now, I want to pause and extend commendations to Minister Vaz, who has continued the quest to implement or to make good the effect, the amendments to the special provisions and the Registration of Titles Act, which we believe will go a far way in helping persons to obtain titles. But there are still issues with the merger of LAMP and NLA. Staff morale is still very low. Staff members do not know if they will have a job tomorrow. And although there has been some effort at communication with the staff, there still remains a lot that is unknown. The process is not seamless, and we do not expect a perfect system. But when you have a situation, Senator Samudo, where members have been working on 6 months contract for an extended period, they have no gratuity, they have no pension. And so when they are not offered re-employment, then they are forced into that category of unemployed. What are we sending them home to do? And I wish to ask, Mr. President, that there be some insight on some matters relating to LAMP. We wish to know the number of titles that have been issued year on year over the last 5 years, but specifically since the announcement and the commencement of the merger process. We wish to know what is the plan, what is the new plan, and particularly the role of the private entity in this new dispensation. We wish to know whether the targets have been delivered, whether the cadastral map for St. Elizabeth has been completed. You see, Mr. President, for me, I see no color when I speak of LAMP, when I speak of land. Because for me, land is, as said by the Right Honourable Norman Manley, land is the only source of the material life of the people. It provides food and shelter. It furnishes work and health. It is the basis of all production, of all development, of all security, of all growth. It is, in the very truth, the root of our being. Mr. President, I turn to the issue of planning and land use. It's not a secret that as a country we have not done very well, especially in the last 2 decades. Cursory or detailed examination of Kingston and St. Andrew and some of our other major towns clearly indicate that we have not been planning for our development. This is evident in the number of traffic jams, poor infrastructure, inadequate sewage and drainage system, which is compounded by our poor habit of garbage disposal. Mr. President, I am therefore very concerned about the lack of green spaces in our towns and our cities. Increasingly, we see more and more of our green spaces becoming concrete jungle. There are little or no sidewalks in some areas, nowhere for our kids to play. This matter is of particular interest, especially Senator Williams, given the proposed increased density and the construction of high-rise buildings as is being promulgated in the 2017 development order for the Kingston and St. Andrew area. We have Senator Mayor, to take a second look at this. The absence of green space will have considerable effect on the health and wealth of our country. It has implications for fitness, implications for family life, implications for community togetherness, and overall security. Where will our children play? Where will communities meet and play dandy shandy, cricket or football or hopscotch? Who, Senator Mayor? Mr. President, I hope that is not being taken away from my time, you know. Who, Senator Mayor, considers the physical effect of these buildings on the individuals? Mayor, you are aware that research shows that there is a strong correlation between increased rates of suicide, Senator Dr. Longmore, associated with isolation and high-rise dwellings. Dr. Carol Archer, in a recent article, notes that studies in Singapore show that over a 10-year period, high-rise dwelling rose to 51% of the housing stock, and the rate of suicide accidents associated with these high-rise increased fourfold. Similarly, studies here in Jamaica, Senator Hill, shows that the lack of proper infrastructure and basic urban services in various communities contribute the risk of depression with different environmental stressors affecting men and women. Where is that consideration in our developmental plan? Therefore, it is with much urgency that we need to revisit our planning rules and regulations to ensure, Senator Mayor, that we not only develop physically, but we develop sustainably, protecting our families, our future, our environment. And I know I have your support. Yeah. Mr. President, in 2015, I became pregnant, and I was struck. Yes, prosperity man. But, Mr. President, I was struck. I was struck by the information I received during my own prenatal care. The said information was that I was required to pay upfront and then reclaim from my provider. Clearly, I was in awe. I mean, I have an insurance, yeah? In fact, 2 insurance. I was in awe. Closer to my delivery, as I sought to register at a private hospital, I was again amazed to find out that my insurance only covered a very minimum amount. I recalled a few weeks after learning about that, I had a discussion in that room with my colleague senators, some of whom are here today. And I asked them, Senator Hill, to ensure that when we return in government, that the issue was made public, because I thought it was wrong. Unfortunately, and perhaps fortunately, I became wrapped up in my bundle of joy, and the matter was not pursued. But today, Mr. President, I have a medium available, which I now use. And I'm using this forum to make a plea on behalf of all pregnant and soon-to-be pregnant women for there to be a review of the existing insurance policy where women have to pay upfront for prenatal care. It is wrong on every level. And unfair. In preparing for this presentation, I took the opportunity, as I normally do, to talk to some of the persons in the field. And I sought to get from these insurance agents an understanding as to the rationale, the reason behind this policy. And I tell you, Mr. President, I could not be given a satisfactory reason. Colleagues, imagine with me, if you can, a young lady, perhaps in a low-end job or self-employed. She can barely make ends meet, but she values the importance of insurance. And so every month or every week, she puts aside that money so that one day, because she does plan to have kids, one day, when that blessing occurs, she will be in a position to take care of her medical needs. So you can imagine this lady, after 5 years of paying insurance, gets involved in a relationship and then becomes pregnant. She's overwhelmed, understandably, with happiness. And she visits her OBG. She is delighted beyond words when she's told that everything is going fine. After her visit, she goes to the cashier to pay, gives them her card, and is told, oh, we don't accept your card. You have to pay up front and claim. She's surprised. She called him. She's surprised. But she lets it slide. As is the norm, Senator Longmore, she's asked to do an ultrasound. So she goes to the company that does ultrasound, anyone of her choice. And she hands them her credit card, her insurance card. And to her shock, her amazement, she's told, oh, we do not accept. You have to pay up front. Can you imagine the disappointment, the anger even? Not only has this lady for 5 years sacrificed to pay her insurance, knowing that one day she will need it,
She paid early too.
but she's now being told that she has to upfront all those costs and then claim from the insurance company, who may or may not give her back everything. She can ill afford these costs and finds herself, notwithstanding a health insurance, visiting the public hospital where she has to suffer the inconvenience of waiting for long hours. Imagine the inconvenience, the disappointment, the challenge, the financial challenge she must now go through after all that sacrifice. Mr. President, that simply cannot be fair. On average, it costs a pregnant woman, and we're talking about someone that has a normal pregnancy, $50,000 for prenatal visits depending on her doctor of choice. $16,000 minimum for the 2 ultrasounds that she has to do, and $10,000 to $15,000 minimum for the blood work that she has to do. And this is in a normal pregnancy. Plus, there's a prenatal tablets that you must take to ensure that the baby gets the nutrients so it can grow healthy. Why should she be forced to pay out of her pocket if she cannot benefit when she needs it? What if she had said to the insurance company, pay my bills and I will pay you after? Would that be acceptable? No. So why should the reverse be acceptable? I say, Mr. President, that it is wrong and we must condemn it. But it gets worse, Mr. President. It gets worse. Imagine another young lady having discovered that she is pregnant and unfortunately suffers a miscarriage. And she has to get medical attention because she had to do a DNC. Dr. Lamore can tell us what that is. But she had to get medical attention. You missed the part about your humor, sir. She later found out that she is again pregnant, and this time it's a successful pregnancy. So she goes to the insurance company, or she goes to the hospital to register for delivery, and she's told, oh, but we can't cover you fully because you are pregnant again within a 12-month period. What madness, Mr. President. What heartlessness in our insurance industry. Mr. President, I am convinced that our insurance companies are run by men and women of heart. And I say, let us start showing that heart today. Mr. President, whereas the government does not generally interfere in the operations of the private sector, I believe that in a matter such as this, the government has a duty and obligation to commence discussion and investigation to ensure that citizens are treated fairly and balanced by our insurance companies. I therefore call upon the government, both sides, to join hands to investigate this practice and commence a discussion with our private sector to see how a more equitable and humane position can be arrived at. Mr. President, in her opening, my colleague and friend, Senator Morrison, made an impassioned plea for us as a society to refocus on what matters. My sister, I support your call. I stand with you. I believe as a country, we need to make hay while the sun shines regarding the use of medical marijuana. Indeed, it is the new gold. But I also want to join with you as a mother, as a female, as a leader, to make a call for us as a society to take stock of how we treat with each other, how we treat our children, how we treat our women. Enough cannot be said about the gruesome killings of our children. Where is our soul? Have we become a country without a conscience? And Senator Morrison, I salute your call. I stand with you. I support you. Let us not forget that as a country, we will be judged based on how we treat the most vulnerable in our society, our children, the disabled, and the elderly. I pray, Mr. President, that we will redouble our efforts to protect those who need our protection most. I pray that we will learn the patience of Job, remembering Senator Cavan Gale, that a soft answer turneth away wrath, but grievous words, Senator Charles Sinclair, stir up anger. Mr. President, and your responses are always soft, yes. Mr. President, I pray that as a country, we will get back to the basics of life and become the God-centered country we have always been. A loving God Senator Crawford to order our steps, as only then will we be a people truly united and successful, because we are at one with our Maker.
Amen.
In closing, Mr. President, I pray that Eternal Father will bless this land, strengthen us the weak to cherish, and give us vision lest we perish, as we seek to build a prosperous Jamaica that works for all. I thank you.
Left it up. Well done. Well done.
Thank you very much, Senator Fraser Binns and company. Senator Longmore.
Mr. President. Thank you.
Senator Crawford, I hope you notice that the ladies are getting acclamation from both sides, you know. You must watch yourself. What you take sleep, you know. Okay.
Are you saying I should become a leader?
Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Longmore.
Mr. President. Good morning. It is still good morning. No, good afternoon. We're into the afternoon. Senator Fraser Binns took us straight through. And you see, it's one up against two, you know. You can distribute now. Yes, sir. Thank you. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. Jeremiah 29:11, words of the Bible that has held my hand this past year. And I give thanks for being here today. Mr. President, I rise to make my contribution to the State of the Nation debate. And as I rise, I give thanks to the Almighty, who is gracious in mercy and gives me the strength to persevere. I give thanks to our very supportive Prime Minister, the Honourable Andrew Michael Holness, who sees the strength in me to continue to serve Jamaica here in this House. I give thanks to my husband, Alex, who holds my hand and exemplifies in sickness and in health. My two sons, who when I needed a hug or a kiss, and even a medal, they provided it without prompting because they sensed it was needed. And Senator Binns, I am with you with respect to the political sacrifice we women who are mothers have to make. And this last year, I just want to relate that of all the hats that I have worn, the Senate is the one that I continue to wear, even when I had no hair. Mr. President, I give thanks here again to you and the rest of my Senate colleagues on both sides of the aisle, colleagues in that other place, and my colleagues at the Department of Psychiatry at UWI, Professors Abel and Gibson, Doctors Lowe, Martin, and Sewell. They have been a strength for me. I give thanks to my doctors who have been involved in my treatment. I won't name the names. They might be flooded and inundated with new patients. But my oncologists, my plastic surgeon, my general surgeon, my physiotherapist, I thank you. I give thanks to Jamaica at large and the many who have sent positive thoughts and prayers my way. Thank you. Mr. President, I can tell you, it takes cash to care. The Pan American Health Organization's recommendation is that the government spending for healthcare as a percentage of GDP be benchmarked at 6%. we are at 3.5%, and that has been so since about 2015. If we are to see improvements in health, we must see improvements within our economy, not just for the ability of the ministry to care, but for individuals to make the right choices in pursuing healthy options in their daily lives. In this breath, Mr. President, I am happy to recognize growth and maintained confidence in our economy. Mr. President, the World Data Atlas at NOMA.com indicates that the Prosperity Index of Jamaica took a nosedive from 2012 to 2014, from a point value of 62 down to 54. Mr. President, objectively speaking, I am happy to report that when the 2016 is compared to 2015, there is a measured increase of 1.83%, with maintenance of such increase into 2017. Mr. President, the JLP is working to fulfill its commitment of prosperity pursuit of its people, level up the dollar in our pockets, and it is my hope to see such reflective in our health care. It is one thing to have to treat disease and rehabilitate post its impact. It is a whole different thing to focus on prevention. For a number of years now, that paradigm shift has been made and is reflective within the society, where we're seeing more and more choosing to take a preventative approach. The very effective and now regional campaign heralded by our Minister of Health, the Honourable Christopher Tufton, Jamaica Moves, is a major step in the right direction of encouraging exercise and hydration as a part of our daily lives. We see where there will be an expansion of the Jamaica Moves program to include a program for workplace health and wellness activities, introduction in the high school system in collaboration with the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information, as well as public education on health and wellness programs. Continued Jamaica Moves parish tours, and now to also include community tours around health centers in conjunction with community-based organizations. We're moving with Jamaica. Mr. President, it is clear as well we must get the fundamentals of good health and wellness by firstly taking personal responsibility. But would it not be great to see such initiatives as Jamaica Moves leveled up to families? Yeah. How very effective it would be for not just physical health reasons to see families encouraged to make time to work out together, setting aside an hour per week to sweat together, taking prevention to not just the individual unit, but to the family unit. The benefits, Mr. President, could be multifold. The decision to reduce sugar contents of drinks available to our schools and consumers at large is bold and celebrated by healthcare personnel island-wide, Mr. President. That campaign will be continuing as a series of avenues, including fiscal measures to encourage manufacturers to cut back on added sugar. The National School Feeding Program is a critical juncture where we could positively lay the foundation of healthy eating in our young children. It is even more exciting to see indications from our Agricultural Minister, the Honourable Audley Shaw, in response to the motion brought by Member of Parliament Ronald Thwaites regarding the increased use of nutritious local produce under the school feeding program. And Mr. President, I would like to point out that this discussion has been ongoing for a number of years. In fact, when Minister Tufton was assigned to Agriculture and Minister Montague after him, and they tried to get natural juices and eggs into school. But today, I will quote the Honourable Minister Shaw. There are several agricultural products in which we already have achieved 100% market share that could be used in the school feeding program, such as carrots, callaloo, cabbage, pumpkin, sweet potato, breadfruit, cassava, yam, and green bananas, just to name a few. Mr. President, we're leveling up from Bulla. Mr. President, in one sweep, we could improve the health physically and mentally of our young, lay a foundation for healthy choices and lifestyles, impact families and communities, and reap the economic benefits through increased agricultural production, farming income, and employment in rural areas. Mr. President, permit me to expound, and I will quote Minister Shaw again as he spoke of what is an important food that should be incorporated into the program, the sweet potato. It is a very healthy food for us to feed our children while they are in school. Information passed to me indicates that the sweet potato contains over 15 health benefits, including prevention of vitamin A deficiency, improvement in vision, and the management of weight and diabetes. He added that the sweet potato can also help in fights against cancer, certain cancers, assist, and I was eating sweet potato, assist to regulate blood pressure, prevent ulcers, and improve memory. Mr. President has also seen that this great produce is more healthy than regular Irish potatoes. They have a lower glycemic index, more fiber, and contain excellent amounts of vitamin A. Mr. Shaw, he also said that pumpkin puree is another important food that can be incorporated into the program. He notes that it contains 10% of the daily requirement of potassium, which is needed to support a healthy digestive system. And Mr. President, you wonder why that I am emphasizing these complex carbohydrates that are naturally within our reach. This is because as a medical practitioner, there is a definite link between the diet of our people, and especially our children, and neurodevelopmental disorders that could occur, such as autism, ASD, Asperger's. It is seen in my clinical practice, Asperger's, Asperger's. It is seen, I have had clients, children, 8 years, that come to me on 4 different medications from overseas. And a change of their diet, I have them on less than half of one medication. A child who was diagnosed with autism and ADHD. And this is one of many. And so I endorse significantly this possibility of incorporating these foods into our school feeding program. The minister pointed out that these crops are easy to incorporate in the meal plans for children. And so I implore Minister Shaw and Reid to even level up this initiative more. What prevents us from supplying our children with an option of a lemongrass tea, a soursop leaf tea, lime leaf tea, or good old chocolate tea as a part of their diet? An option of fresh, no sugar added juice that is prepared from seasonal fruits and vegetables that are usually going to rotten waste when owners can't find a market. And I say owners, not farmers, because we could have a system where, just like you have a cherry tree or a mango tree in the back of your yard, you could take the produce to a juice center, not very expensive to set up, at maybe a RADA office, that is very closely located to a number of schools, and so fresh juice could be supplied to our children. How much better than that maybe the cherry tree in your backyard is supplying the basic school beside you with some fresh cherry juice. Mr. President, Senator Binns mentioned the need for green space. Senator Binns, I don't know if it's the maternalistic instinct. I concur fully. It is about growth and natural growth. I think there is a benefit in what I have termed agri-therapy, which is farming and growing our own, even in our little backyards, at schools, each little child having maybe a little pot that he just plants his little thing in. And I think this is therapeutic for our people. Mr. President, just as we aspire to make our citizens wealthier, we aspire to make them healthier. With the latest WHO data published in 2018, life expectancy in Jamaica is for males 73.6%, females 78.5%, and total life expectancy is 76 overall years, which gives Jamaica a world life expectancy rating of around 59. Now, with almost over 90% of the causes of death in Jamaica being directly disease-related, it is clear we have much work to do to improve the health of our people to reach prosperity levels. Mr. President, current medicine is technology-driven, and practitioners need their tools to practice their craft of caring. In his budget presentation, Minister Tufton, the Honourable Minister of Health, Minister Tufton, highlighted the significant problem we have of an ailing healthcare infrastructure, as we've seen culminating with the Cornwall Regional Hospital. The current organizational structure of the public health sector, Mr. President, places too little emphasis on preventative maintenance of our buildings and equipment, leaving them to fall into disrepair, and has been so for decades. We have a serious problem within our culture of non-maintenance. We drive our cars until we hear that sound getting louder and it just broke down. We push our bodies until the aches get worse and we just pop down. We use our physical infrastructure until oftentimes they just fall apart. This approach needs to change. We need to recognize that, as John F. Kennedy put it, the time to repair the roof is when the sun is still shining. And this applies to all equipment, inclusive of our own physical bodies. But too much of our very costly, hard-earned or goodwill donated equipment is seen chucked away in corners or shoved aside in some side room within our hospitals and clinics. Many lives, Mr. President, could be extended or saved if a ventilator worked, if the bed could elevate as it should, if the CT or X-ray machine was operational. My list could go on. Mr. President, there needs to be more emphasis on the upkeep and care of our equipment and workspaces within healthcare. Training our local people to conduct maintenance to first world standards. And you will see I have what I should relate a situation that I came across at the Jamaica Cancer Society, where they had a mobile mammogram when I was trying to find out what the situation was with persons getting mammograms. And they apparently had a mobile mammography machine and would want to raise funds to get another one. And I said to myself, so you have a unit that is broken down. Why not find some young kids who are in engineering and say, go on, just tinker with it. Try and see how it works. Get some research, get some books. Try and teach some young person how to fix that mammogram machine. Yes, raise funds to get another. But here you have a resource that you could be using and putting to very good effort. And so there are many such stories throughout our healthcare sector with respect to very expensive equipment, very expensive to maintain, that we at times have to pay huge monies to persons to come in from overseas to do simple work that we could be doing here locally. This maintenance, Mr. President, I reiterate what Minister Tufton spoke of in the other place. Mr. Speaker, the Cornwall Regional Hospital experience is emblematic of the state of our healthcare infrastructure in Jamaica. It is old, limping, and needs resources for rehabilitation and expansion. Mr. President, I will now add, the maintenance of our public health equipment needs to be made a priority for our people's health, and we should seek to be doing this maintenance ourselves. Let me shift to another significant impactor of the cost of healthcare in Jamaica, Mr. President, that of crime and violence, where physical costs may be measurable in dollars and in terms of lost wages, etc. But the mental and emotional impact can only be estimated, as such is also generational. The government's action to gain a grasp on what has long been a concerning and at times crisis situation of crime in our country is bearing fruit. We are seeing significant positive indicators of the zones of special operations and the state of emergency that are in place. Mr. President, we're not only seeing reductions in major crimes, we're also getting reports of improved business performance and productivity, as was indicated by operators of the shop For Everyone, Bashko, in Montego Bay, where a manager related on a very popular public radio show that he was seeing more profits as persons have adjusted their shopping habits and are more organized to make use of non-curfewed hours. Mr. President, in these areas of Mount Salem, Denham Town, and St. Catherine at large, where serious security measures have had to be taken, residents and business operators are leveling up their livelihood and feeling safer. In one community, a man who identified himself as Cleveland S. said, "We're seeing a lot of progress, but we can't talk out. The fear factor is still there. If you speak, they say you're an informer, but the security forces are doing good work. The citizens want peace, and many more would talk out, but they're afraid. This has to be a long-term thing until all the criminal elements are weeded out. There is still more to do," end quote, from Cleveland S. I endorse the direct anti-violence measures, Mr. President, because they directly reduce crime and impact on the health bill of our country. But I similarly celebrate what this government has done in terms of a social intervention focus and humanitarian awareness as part of these special security efforts, heralded under the SDC. It is good to hear of reports of police and community interaction in jovial exchanges, kicking a ball and playing dominoes. We see in the area of community development and employment, there are school-wide behavior modification programs implemented. Additional support is being provided by the HOPE program through the Heart Trust, as well as programmers geared towards entrepreneurship. Mr. President, this administration is working assiduously to indeed level up the lives of people within the ZOSOs and the state of emergency. We are seeing, as part of the social intervention program, the zinc fence substitution and integrated infrastructure project being implemented. In terms of skills training, a program to support this area has been approved and is currently in the procurement stage for service providers to provide new training areas and modalities. There is an incentive program for the proper management of solid waste and the creation of environmental wardens.
Yeah, you just answered it.
But Mr. President, amidst all of this, what I especially celebrate under the Ministry of Ministry of Education, Youth and Information, is the National Parent Support Commission's Parents' Places. To date, there is established over 125 parent places in primary schools across the 6 regions of the Ministry of Education. The parent place is described as a one-stop shop for parent information, skills training, and support on effective parenting. It offers what is described as 21st century parenting through quality information and referrals, access to parenting resources, and workshops. The NPSC has developed a program called Stay Connected, which is designed to increase and maintain parental involvement throughout the adolescence years, which are so very critical. We hear day in and day out of the importance of family structure and parenting in our society, and here is a program that is directly addressing it. Mr. President, the health of Jamaicans could be greatly enhanced through these centers, where persons are enabled to strengthen the quality of interactions and relations within their family and the community at large, and could be seen as a point of possible intervention for corporate, Senator Webby, Senator Crawford, and other diaspora groups that would want to help with nation building. You could see where groups could be coming in to fund the park and encourage play within our society. I mentioned it in last year's presentation I made. the powerful impact of play within our society. And this is where agents could come in and enable that on the ground. Mr. President, I cannot speak about violence in our society impacting healthcare and not recognize the horrific plight of our women and children. I, along with colleagues here, are members of the Joint Select Committee reviewing legislation relating to some of the most horrific acts our society has to recognize as a part of our own. And we are working diligently to bring these laws to date. I must also recognize the fact that just this week, the Honourable Minister Babs Grange announced the identification of a site for a much-needed place of safety for the victims of domestic violence. We have also now seen the first ever Women's Health Survey, which is valuable research. In formulating policy and program for our women. A significant finding from which I will relate here, and which I can clearly see how it manifests in our society. It was found in this survey that women who have ever been pregnant were significantly, and Senator Binns, you might shudder at this, women who have ever been pregnant were significantly more likely to experience physical abuse by their male partner, 27.4%, than women who had never been pregnant, 11.3%. And that speaks volumes. 20% of women were beaten during pregnancy, the beating involving kicking or punching in the abdomen. It speaks volumes about our society. Mr. President, pregnancy, as we see Senator Binns glowing, is a celebration of life. But we also recognize, and this is where my clinical hat comes in, that it is a significant time of stress. It is a significant time when relationships are strained. And it is a significant point, because I always try to find where is the positive. It is a significant point where we could intervene as a society, where we could have within our antenatal clinics, where we are coming in contact with a lot of these women who are not able to say what is happening. We could have programs there targeting them, to help them, to inform them, to educate them, to encourage them to bring their partners in when they recognize that this pregnancy is not as celebrated as it should be. These are the lives of our young Jamaican people that we're speaking about. Mr. President, as it relates to violence in our society, I am in fulsome agreement with our Honourable Prime Minister when he stated, there is an established and enforced policy of no corporal punishment in our early childhood institutions, particularly our infant schools. My stance on that matter is not the conventional thinking. What we have been doing in allowing corporal punishment in our educational institution is to entrench and legitimize the use of unregulated force and violence. End quote. Mr. President, children do live what they learn. And as a society, we need to stop the double standard of flinging licks and then bemoaning when vicious acts are committed on our innocent. And as such, as a government, we are committed to leveling up, to stem this cycle by proceeding to amend the Education Act to explicitly and expressly prohibit corporal punishment in schools. Mr. President, we must also see targeted efforts, in my opinion, of enhancing conflict resolution in our societies. Too many intimate, interpersonal, family, and community relationships suffer with grave consequences on the basis of sometimes very simple misunderstandings. We need to be more tender and caring to each other in how we communicate, in how we look out for each other. Senator Crawford, since I sat here, I saw you reach over and turned off Senator Morris's mic probably about 4 or 5 times. And it was done with such care. It was done with such care and understanding. And that is also a side of Jamaica, because when Jamaicans love and show care, it is something beautiful to see. And you know, it takes me to where we are as a society now, where social media is a big part of who we are. And Mr. President, just on my way here, you know, you're listening to the radio and you're hearing about one social media personality being antagonistic and at wars with another social media personality and how she go right or off for this. It's aggressive. It's unnecessary. And we recognize that within our society, we idolize persons who sometimes chuck badness and who sometimes have this very aggressive demeanor. But in the same radio broadcast, I heard something new on the street. I don't know if you know this, Senator Morris. When somebody said, them just going to draw them receipt and check out. Jamaicans are humorous people. And humor is one way that we can cope with stress. And if there is any way we can encourage that, I will always endorse it. So when you draw your receipt and you check out, is when you're arguing apparently with somebody and you just can't bother. And you say, man, may I draw my receipt and may I check out? Meaning that you're stepping away from the confrontation. You're saying, I'm over, I'm done. I don't need to go down that road. And this is an attitude and a behavior stemmed with humor that I think we should propagate within our society.
Absolutely.
Mr. President, the fallout of violence in our society, apart from death and economic burden, we see it in our children. The top 5 diagnoses of clients seen at the Child Guidance Clinic include 1. Depressive disorders, conduct disorders, learning disorders, child abuse, and anxiety. The Jamaica Health and Lifestyle Survey showed depression was highest among age 15 to 34 years and those greater than 75 years. Overall rate of depression was 9.87% for males and 18.49% for females. Mr. President, this is affecting our people in what are to be their most productive years. Our children who are so afflicted with mental disorders oftentimes do not get the level of care they need, and they grow up to be teens and adults with a lot of unresolved issues. How do you think this manifests? Gangs, violence, recidivism. Mr. President, as a psychiatrist, I'm relieved to see that within the Ministry of Health's plans, there is effort being placed to address mental health within our society. The Ministry of Health, is to establish a new toll-free mental health suicide prevention hotline. Mr. President, I implore that as we pursue the care of our severely mentally ill, as in the case with the proposed community care of patients at Bellevue Hospital, we aim to have rehabilitative services that orient the mindset of working and enabling skills that optimize employment, interpersonal skills, and work ethic amongst persons who are living with mental illnesses. A mental illness is like any other illness, where if you take your medications and you avoid relapsing factors, you can function just as anyone else. And we need to remove the stigma and allow persons to live their fulsome lives. Mr. President, we must also help our children and teens who are especially in rural communities with a lot of these disorders that I just alluded to. We must help them to access treatment facilities that are oftentimes quite at a distance, and so they often become victims and find refuge in the arms of criminal activity instead of making it to a treatment site.
Speaker's time has expired.
Speaker's time being expired, may I ask that it be extended to allow her to complete her presentation.
Thank you, Senator Scott Martin. The question is that the Speaker's time be extended to allow her to complete. Thank you.
Mr. President, I cannot talk mental health, and thank you, colleagues, for allowing me to complete my presentation. Mr. President, I cannot talk mental health in Jamaica and not touch Senator Morrison, the possible legalization of marijuana. The merits of the good Cali weed are becoming more known on a daily basis. The potential cash pot, green gold for Jamaica, and our unique brand is a thing of dreams coming true. But Mr. President, I remind us of the lines of a popular dancehall tune. Shoot and kill, smoke and forget. There is no question of the link of marijuana and other drug use to violence. When decriminalized in 2015 under the previous administration, in my opinion, Mr. President, the public sensitization re the dangers of cannabis was woefully inadequate. Apart from highlighting the very grave dangers to vulnerable groups, it would have been prudent to have done specific research around cannabis use in our society. A study of pre- and post-decriminalization use pattern amongst vulnerable groups would have been very useful now in our consideration of legalization. Mr. President, as a psychiatrist who treats mental illnesses, I have to give my full due to this discussion. A new study coming out of the University of Maastricht in the Netherlands has revealed that cannabis smoking can treble the risk of developing a mental illness such as schizophrenia. In one of the biggest investigations launched into the long-term effects of the drug, scientists have uncovered dramatic evidence proving marijuana is dangerous and can cause serious psychotic disorders in people with no mental illness. The research appears to confirm anecdotal evidence of the dangers of regular use. It shows that people who smoke cannabis are nearly 3 times more likely than non-users to develop a psychotic disorder like hallucinations, paranoia, manic depression, and even schizophrenia. And that risk increases with the amount smoked. The Netherlands has one of the highest rates of cannabis use in the world because of its relaxed laws. But this is the first major study to examine the long-term dangers to mental health. Mr. President, there is also a recognized possible link of cannabis to neurodevelopmental disorders, autism, ADHD, and I have here to note Professor Sam Vaughan's recent research that Minister Reid related to us, I think it was last week, regarding the incidence of autism in our society amongst our children. It is also possibly causative in cancers, heart and vascular disease. Now, on the other side of the coin, there are tremendous medicinal value and a massive economic benefit that could be had from legalization. We see in both California and Colorado, teen marijuana use went down post-legalization. However, a new analysis of data finds that marijuana legalization was associated with cannabis consumption, with increased cannabis consumption among 8th and 10th graders in Washington, but not amongst 12th graders. So the younger pre-teen kids. Of course, rum does far more damage. Our findings suggest that the legalization, and I quote, our findings suggest that the legalization of recreational marijuana use in 2012 reduced stigma and perceptions of risk associated with marijuana use, the researchers wrote. A shift in social norms regarding marijuana use may have in turn increased marijuana use among adolescents in Washington. They suggest that the older students' attitudes were unaffected because they were already well informed. Mr. President, if we are to take the path of legalization of the weed, I implore we do so responsibly and with full recognition of the dangers to vulnerable groups, and with effective strategies to educate and prepare our population at large, but especially our children. Prior to its legalization, prior to the legalization of cannabis, the government of Canada took a calculated public health approach to the legalization and regulation of cannabis. And this is how I hope our administration will pursue the matter. The aim was to raise awareness of health and safety facts of cannabis use, prevent problematic cannabis use, promote health choices, protect youth by restricting access to cannabis, prevent drug-impaired driving, strictly regulate the cannabis supply chain, monitor cannabis use patterns, and ensure industry compliance with legislative and regulatory requirements. My energy is limited. I can't speak as much over. Early federal efforts related to public health education focused on building the evidence base to inform cannabis public education and awareness initiatives. These early efforts included conducting public opinion research to understand Canadians' knowledge, attitudes, and behaviors relating to cannabis and drug-impaired driving, undertaking market research to inform approaches for cannabis to reach youth, young adults, and parents, and making note of pre-adolescent risk, understanding lessons learned from other jurisdictions that have taken the path of legalization, engaging stakeholders with more than 90 organizations that are active in delivering public education and awareness activities. And Mr. President, I will also add the awareness that needs to be had re cannabis in other forms such as edibles, pastes, ointments, and salves. With the known links to possible illnesses such as developmental disorders in children and adults, psychotic illnesses, cancer causation, heart and vascular disease, we must ensure the sensitization of vulnerable groups such as pregnant and breastfeeding mothers, young children and adolescents, mentally affected, and those genetically at risk, persons living with heart or vascular disease, and persons predisposed to cancer, and the elderly. This indeed would be taking the weed economy to higher levels in a responsible way. Mr. President, for obvious reasons, I cannot close my presentation and not look at the health situation of cancer in our society. Current figures indicate that so far in 2018, there has been 7,348 new cases of cancer diagnosed within the Jamaican population, with the common ones being prostate, breast, colon, lung, uterine, cervical, stomach, and the lymphomas. The persons usually affected are those in their peak productive years, and oftentimes are significant contributors to family and the community. It is a major health concern for our people and a diagnosis that is feared. But Mr. President, allow me to explain what cancer is, and as maybe with understanding the fear may be less. It is essentially your body's normal growth or repair process gone awry. It can happen anywhere and to anyone, but clearly there are risk factors which I will not detail here, but suffice to say much is unknown. There are many reasons and there are many lessons I could convey, but a few highlights. Firstly, with respect to causation, though not solely, it is my personal opinion that my cell phone played a role. I had been potty training my kids for 2 years before that, and I would fall asleep with the phone close to me on my affected side. And I say this here because of how tied we are to our cellular technologies. We don't know the full effects, and we don't know how they might be impacting on us and our children. Let us aim to set ourselves technology-free, even for a moment, for our health. Mr. President, I think the public awareness of the need for screening is at an all-time high. And yes, there is great need for more access to such. But I reiterate that the best screen is self-awareness and seeking out answers quickly. I don't want to extend this discourse to what is not appropriate. But allow me to highlight to Jamaica that yes, there are a lot of questions around the role of non-traditional medicine or the natural approaches in treating cancer and other diseases in general. Now, whilst I recognize some have effectivity, that is not so for all, and established, tried treatment methods are a safe way to go. Mr. President, you must take caution with some of these natural approaches. They can affect your liver and kidney, and you could end up in a worse state than you were before. I have heard of practitioners of natural medicine chastising patients for going the conventional route. Well, I am here to prove that the conventional route works. But I am also useful of some of the natural approaches. So you have to tweak it. I drink my tea and I do this, but I don't depend on such. But that's another discussion, as I said before. That being said, Mr. President, and I need to inject here that I chose to do, when I came around my diagnosis, I chose to do my treatment here in Jamaica because I know I could get world-class care here. I know that with my background, I could have coordinated all the different and multiple avenues involved in tackling this monster. That being said, Mr. President, there is great need for coordination and collaboration within the public sphere for treating cancers. We see where a start has been made with the National Cancer Treatment Center opened at the Corner Regional Hospital in November 2017, and treatment of patients has been ongoing since. Infrastructure work on the National Cancer Treatment Center at the St. Joseph's Hospital has been completed, and all major equipment has been installed and commissioned. But we're starting from 0, and we're at 2. I hope we get to rural Jamaica soon. When it comes to the care of persons who are in such need, I don't see political color. I celebrate the fact that this is being done. Under whichever administration, I celebrate the fact that this is being done. Mr. President, upon grasping my reality, as I said, I chose to do my treatment here. But that is my unique circumstance of being able to access these persons quickly and being able to afford the very high cost of treatment. I'm aware this is not the norm, and I wish with all my heart It was for all Jamaicans alike. The blaring reality to cancer treatment in Jamaica is a very high cost, and a serious discussion needs to be had around funding cancer care under the remits of a bigger discussion on funding healthcare in Jamaica. Now, Mr. President, in every forum that I have spoken and related my own personal journey with dealing with cancer, I have implored persons as best to prepare themselves. I did it here in this house by seeking good insurance. But, Mr. President, in the same breath, I must also say that many people suffer greatly at the hands of some of these insurance companies, as Senator Binns has just alluded to, with respect to prenatal care. I join hands with you, Senator Binns, because in my reality of cancer treatment, when you go and you're sitting there to get your chemo, and you don't see the person who was there the last session, and you hear them insurance run out. How can your insurance run out? And you've been paying the premiums. How can your insurance not cover when you are diagnosed with a particular disorder that is taking your life, and then you're told, we don't cover that? It is grossly wrong, and I wonder if there is need for an independent tribunal where persons who are so affected, who may not be able to access the medical consultation to counteract what the insurance company is telling them, if there is a need for an avenue that is provided for these persons to seek justice, to seek insurance justice. Mr. President, we see postings of billions of insurance dollars profit. And yes, persons are dying with the policy grasped in their hands, waiting for insurance justice. It is wrong, simply wrong, Mr. President, and it affects people when they are at their lowest. In closing, Mr. President, what matters in life and what really matters to people? Their health, their happiness, their children, their safety, their security, their future. As a government, this administration is focused on enabling the best possible outcomes of these concerns of our Jamaican people. We made a commitment to prosperity, and we are steadfastly trying. We all know where we're coming from, and for sure, we all recognize we don't want to go back there. Mr. President, with strategic planning, hard work, and efficiency, I hope to see healthcare level up for all Jamaicans as it has been for me. Mr. President, if it so pleases you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Longmore. I must say that I enjoyed both presentations very much. A certain amount of latitude was expended with respect to the question of time. I cannot guarantee the rest of you that you will get the latitude. Thank you very much. Minister.
Mr. President, thank you very much. And I think it has been...
Sorry. Just before, Minister, may I just ask the members to be reminded that on Monday, that's Monday coming, November the 12th, at Gordon House here at 10 a.m., the National Youth Parliament will convene. It is expected to last for about 3 hours, and I'm being told that it would be fantastic if you could come at the start of it for even 15 minutes, or come during the course of that Youth Parliament. It is a collaborative effort between the Houses of Parliament, the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information. Thank you, Minister. And I will be saying a few words at the opening. Thank you, Minister.
Mr. President, thank you very much. I think it's fair to say that although women are the smallest number among the senators, that having both Senators Fraser Binns and Longmore's presentation this morning, which really gave brought a strong perspective based on personal experience and their particular awareness of areas of passion. I think that both are to be congratulated on their presentations today, and you have represented us well. And by us I mean women. But it is not intended to do any further business, Mr. President. So I ask that the Senate be adjourned for a date to be fixed.
And you point out that we're not sitting next week because of the conference of the Labour Party, which normally we don't sit the weekend before. Senator Crawford, you have been the guest speaker. Senator Crawford. Senator Crawford. You have been the guest speaker of the Labour Party for years. The question is that the Senate be adjourned for a date to be fixed. Those in favour? Against? Senate now stands adjourned. Thank you.